I'm excited to bring in our Thursday panel, my good buddy and the documentary extraordinaire filmmaker, the founder of League of American Voters, Steve Cortes. Welcome back. And a double shot of the Daily Caller. You don't want just one Daily Caller. You get two Daily Callers, Reagan Reese and Ashley Brasfield, both from the Daily Caller. Boom, boom, boom. We are going to get more Daily Caller than is probably recommended in your daily allowance. If there were a daily allowance for Daily Caller, we'd be hitting it right now. Ladies, thank you both for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah,
totally.
All right, a lot to get to today. I don't even know where to start, but I'm going to start here. Clinton got subpoenaed. For a lot of us on the right, we're like, this is a no-brainer. Peter Navarro, Steve Bannon went to jail because a sham committee issued a subpoena and they didn't abide wholeheartedly by it, and therefore they went to jail. And now Bill and Hillary Clinton are like, we're not showing up. Steve Cortes, where does this go? I mean, do Republicans wuss out, or do they actually go, we're going to refer this to the DOJ and you're going to jail too?
Yeah, well, it certainly needs to get referred, and then the DOJ needs to take action. I think this is going to be a huge test for Pam Bondi. I think a lot of us on the right, frankly, have been disappointed so far in Pam Bondi at the Department of Justice. So this will be a very good test because we cannot exist as a republic. We can't be a healthy republic and have two parallel tracks of justice. And that's certainly what this whole situation reeks of right now. You're exactly correct that those of us who are on the political right, we get prosecuted. We get the full force of the law, even when the panel wasn't properly constructed, to your point. But those on the left, the big shots, the connected cabal of DC insiders like people with the last name Clinton, they don't suffer the consequences from blatantly disregarding and disobeying the orders of a lawful, legitimate congressional panel. So this is going to be a big test. I hope Pam Bondi is up to the challenge. I hope the Attorney General takes personal action and makes sure that there are consequences.
Reagan Reese, what are your White House sources telling you? Because there was a story out this week, and again, I don't know that I put any stock into it, that the president was growing a little frustrated with how Pam Bondi wasn't moving fast enough on a lot of fronts. Do you put this in that bucket that Steve Cortes mentioned? I mean, like, if you're President Trump, you're like, why are you guys, like, Comer's going to send over a referral? Are you going to act? I got to imagine President Trump saying what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Yeah, I think Steve is exactly right. I think this is another test for Pam Bondi. I have had some sources reach out to me about that reporting, that they don't think things are trending in the right direction for Pam Bondi. This all goes back to July, when that memo, the Epstein memo concluding the investigation, saying there's no Epstein list, gets quietly leaked to Axios on a holiday weekend and kind of angers the entire base. And it creates this huge, I think, never-ending bad news cycle for not only the Trump administration, but for Pam Bondi specifically. And so this is definitely something I'm keeping my eye on, not just what are Republicans going to do? What is Pam Bondi going to do? But also, is Pam Bondi safe? Will she be the first cabinet official who is going to be out in this Trump administration? I think there's a chance.
Actually, the thing that I find fascinating about that is that, like, Pam Bondi has known Donald Trump a long time, like 20 years. I remember one of the first interactions I ever had with Donald Trump was at a donor event that when I was at the RNC, we had down in Boca Raton. And Pam Bondi was there. And I didn't really know Pam well. And I obviously had never met Donald Trump at that point. And he's calling her out. Pam Bondi, she's a friend of mine. Da-da-da-da. She was the Attorney General at the time. I find what Reagan's saying fascinating, true, but fascinating, meaning two things can be true at the same time. I just wonder if we've reached a tipping point because MAGA's still a little jaded. And you saw the Susie Wiles interview in Vanity Fair where she says she whiffed on the Epstein stuff. Is this the beginning of the end for Bondi?
Yeah, I have that question as well. And we're even seeing that from House Oversight Chairman James Comer currently. He said he's sent a lot of referrals over the DOJ. Nothing's been done about them. And I think there's a growing frustration amongst the administration and even in Congress of the inaction going on within the DOJ currently. We could go back to that July I think it was a Sunday night. I think we picked up the report about 9 p.m. is when the Axios report happened. But I've had all these, hearings, the closed door hearings in my calendar. And the one thing about the Clinton one is it kept getting moved. I have it literally in my calendar of it getting moved multiple times, reaching back out to oversight to see when it was happening. They were in talks with lawyers. And then we see, day of, Bill Clinton doesn't show up, and the day after, Hillary doesn't show up. And then an 8-page letter from their attorneys. And then this kind of, I would say, in a way, snarky letter, and that seemed entitled in ways, saying this is why we're not going to come, and they should have their focuses on other things, to James Comer. So I think there is this feeling of, certain individuals from the administrations, whether it be Obama or Trump, even with the Epstein situation that is ongoing, and it's the frustration is there. Of course, there's multiple elements to this Epstein thing. There's the human trafficking where there's a lot of questions. There's the intelligence aspect. I know you've talked to Professor Alan Dershowitz about a lot of this, who was a former defense attorney for Epstein. But it's grown the curiosity in a lot of ways for this Epstein case. But of course, the big figures where we've seen drops of photos with Bill Clinton involved with, in the pool with Ghislaine Maxwell. So that growing curiosity. And then we have reports even that the DOJ hasn't looked at only 1% of the Epstein documents. I think people still have the right to ask a lot of questions when information like that is being dropped.
All right, guys, if you're looking for that amazing snack, then you got to do what I do right now. I've gotten into Masa Chips, all natural, 3 ingredients. That's right. Corn, seed oil, and salt. That's it. Crunchier, tastier. These are Maha approved snacks. You are not going to regret it. My tip, get the variety pack. Go to Masa, M-A-S-A chips.com, masachips.com/Sean, S-E-A-N, for 25% off. That's masachips.com/Sean. Use code Sean for 25% off. Before I move on to Minnesota, I want to just ask you guys real quick. There's a story out yesterday that Democrats actually might vote with Republicans. They want to seem to be pure on this politically, and almost sort of show, hey, look, this wasn't just about Trump. We meant it. There's a couple, Max Frost, I think Ro Khanna, willing to say, we'll vote with Republicans because we're willing to go after Clinton. We're willing to sacrifice him. So Steve Cortes, the Republicans are going to put this to a vote, I think, Comer, on the House Oversight Committee. Do you think Democrats actually get on board with this?
Yes, and I think including the ones you just named, there are a few Dems who are still somewhat reasonable, at least on some issues. There's not many. They're endangered species in the Democrat Party, that's for sure. But particularly those who have higher aspirations, right? Who want to run for statewide office, House members who want to run statewide, or folks who have presidential aspirations. I think it would be very smart politics for them to say, yeah, actually, Hillary Clinton, you do have to appear, and you had to obey the subpoena. So I think that will happen. Yes.
Ashley, what are your folks sources up there saying?
I do think, Democrats have obviously gotten in line. They see this as they can't win unless they do that. And we saw this with the discharge resolution that Thomas Massie put forward, where he needed the 218 signatures. Only 4 Republicans signed on at the time. Of course, it was passed, brought to the president's desk to be signed on to that law. So the Democrats obviously got on board here, and some of them seem to have a little common sense to save tail at this point.
Reagan, I want to switch gears and talk about ICE in Minnesota. Last night, things ramped up. But this goes to the reporting. And I was shocked. So last night, just so people understand, things get escalated. This guy is trying to evade ICE agents. There's a car chase. He runs. And then they come out and whack, assault is how I would put it, these ICE agents with a shovel. And the guy gets shot in the leg. The New York Times headline, Reagan Reese, let me just read, let me make sure I get this right. The New York Times said, federal agent shoots immigrant. And I tweeted out in response, I said, you missed part of the story here. He shot him because they were coming after him with a shovel. This wasn't like the dude was standing on the street corner with a sign that said he evaded them, he ran from them, and then he came at them with a shovel, and I think a broom too.
Yeah, Sean, this isn't going to be the last time you're going to see a New York Times headline like this if incidents like this keep happening. And I think, unfortunately, they're going to keep happening because I think ICE agents in this country are under attack and have become the target. I've just found the last couple of weeks, this start to 2026, to be so sad, and how divided the country has been. And I think within an hour of the shooting in Minneapolis of Renee Good, there were really 2 camps, and the situation became instantly political, and everyone was fighting about it, throwing out their talking points, and it's something that no one can seem to agree on. And then now in the last week, what we've seen, 2 more incidents of violence with ICE officers and pedestrian, I guess immigrants, you can call them, attacking the ICE agents. And then you see the mainstream media kind of twist the scenario out of reality. I don't know what the solution is, Sean. I think it's very sad, and I'm really worried about our country. And I keep praying, pray for our nation, because that's absolutely what we need to be doing. Because things, especially for those ICE agents, are not in a good place right now.
Ashley, we've learned more. The agent that Renee Good struck with her car has had internal bleeding. I've been interested in the last 18 hours, maybe. Some of these Democrats that initially said F ICE, get ICE out, whatever, are dialing it back a little. And I wonder if they're starting to, if you're picking up on this in terms of Capitol Hill and other places, that they realize they might have gone too far. Like they're talking about defunding ICE, holding up ICE bills. And this to me is the defund the police moment of this year.
Right. I see that in D.C. I agree in that sense. But I would say Tim Walz, he puts out a statement saying, pull out your phones and record ICE if they're in your neighborhood still. That's a recent announcement he just put. So as far as local politicians like Tim Walz, like the Jacob Frays of Minneapolis, we'll see how that goes continuously. I do think the rhetoric needs to be turned back a bit. And of course, we saw I'm calling this really the winter of love. Like we saw in 2020 and 2021, we saw the summer in love in places like Minneapolis due to George Floyd. And all the same politicians were the ones that were a part of that at the time. So why would federal law enforcement and law enforcement in places like Minneapolis feel supported by politicians in that way? Of course, this incident was a tragic scenario. I think everyone agrees with that. But it is this kind of hero personality that a lot of the Democrats are saying, to regular Americans, go out, fight federal law enforcement. Well, you're putting yourself in danger by doing that. This woman was a mother. She put herself in a dangerous situation and put law enforcement in a dangerous situation, and we resulted in a death. So it's a very tragic scenario. I do think the rhetoric needs to be turned down on all levels. And you saw, like Reagan said, people picking sides immediately. Of course, we were all waiting on more video as it was being released the day of and the day after. That kind of showed more of the event. And I think that's the problem we have today.
Steve Cortes,
Ashley, I think you bring up an important point there, too, just by mentioning the weather. And it may not seem that relevant, but I really believe that it is. This is January in Minnesota, okay, and this kind of nonsense is going on. Think of how much worse it is going to get with better weather once we get into spring and summer if we don't stop this nonsense and this anti-cop, anti-law enforcement violence right now. We must get after this, or believe me, this spring and summer will look even worse than 2020 looked, I firmly believe, in places like Minneapolis. Now, thankfully, President Trump and ICE and Tom Homan and all these folks who want to enforce U.S. law and protect American citizens and American jobs, they do have the backing of the American people. I do a lot of polling, and still, law enforcement operations around immigration still poll incredibly well. So there is a super majority of Americans who believe in this. Now, not among the radical crowd that exists in Minneapolis or in Brooklyn or places like that, or on a lot of college campuses, but nationwide, Americans do have Trump's back. And I think, by the way, in terms of if we can give recommendations to the White House, okay, what can you do then to clamp down on this lawlessness and this recklessness from these local and state officials? We've got to go arrest some of them. If you are fomenting violence against ICE agents, you need to be arrested. I'm talking about people like Mayor Fry, people like potentially Governor Walz. There's nothing that says we can't arrest a big city mayor or we can't go and arrest a governor if he is putting the lives of ICE agents in danger with his instructions and his rhetoric. So I think it's time for the White House side and for those of us who believe in law and order to escalate things and take some serious action steps that will show that we mean business.
Reagan, to that point, because I agree with Steve. I mean, this is what's missing in the reporting. That I read you that New York Times headline the other day. The media narrative was someone was dragged from their car, right? Even Renee Good, as unfortunate and tragic as the situation ended, I've pointed this out on like multiple days now. She was obstructing a legal law enforcement operation. She put her car perpendicular in the street. She failed to obey a legal order to get out of the car. Like that part's missing. Right. And to me, I feel like the only way it gets highlighted is to what Steve is saying. At some point, you just need to start arresting people and saying you broke the law, you're being arrested. Because right now, the narrative is these people are all good, pure church-going poets that are on the side of the street with a balloon and a rainbow, maybe a puppy, and they're just getting attacked by their government. And I think until there's an action, right? So if you get arrested, then the narrative has to be, why were they arrested? Oh, they were arrested because they broke the law. And so when the president this morning talked about the Insurrection Act, I just wonder, is that, some people are asking me already, is that a threat or is that real?
Yeah, we also heard from Todd Blanche use the word insurrection to describe what Governor Tim Walz and Mayor Frey are doing in Minneapolis. And I believe he said this is not a threat. This is a promise that he is going to go after them. So I'd say stay tuned for action on that front. I do want to ask you, Sean, on the president's Truth Social post, you might know better than me. Do you think he actually does it? Do you think he invokes the Insurrection Act? And also, what do you think his tipping point is? Like, will we actually see that? That's the big question on my mind. And that's what I'm hoping to ask sources. But I'm curious your thoughts, because you worked for him. You know what it's like to be in his mind.
I think this is sort of like Iran, domestically speaking, which is, it's a warning. Hey, guys, guess what? I will arrest you. I'm warning you now, kind of like what he said to Iran. If you don't stop the killing, I will do this. And they back down. And I think the idea is a warning. You saw, at least you mentioned Mayor Frey, Governor Walz, like they're all suddenly taking this, hey, let's not go too far anymore. Let's calm down the violence. I think they know that he's serious. So the way I'd answer your question is, I don't think yet. I think he's throwing that out there like he does in a lot of negotiations, which is, I can do this and I will do it if you don't calm down. And but that being said, Reagan, I think there's a tipping point. If Trump sees what goes on in Minnesota, Minneapolis in particular, ratchet up the way that the George Floyd BLM riots did with violence and attacks and vandalism, I think he will. Anyone disagree with me?
I think he will, personally, if it keeps up.
Yeah. You have to do something at some point, I think, to protect your ICE officers. They're just under attack. And I don't know. I didn't think that President Trump was going to go into Venezuela and take Maduro, and then he did. And so now I kind of have put everything on the table. When the president threatens to do something, I'm like, he's probably going to do it. He's probably being honest.
Right.
I keep telling people when I talk about the facts on the ground, like how this all kind of started was Nick Shirley, Steve Cortes, really getting rid of a lot of, or exposing a lot of fraud out there. And I know that you've been on this issue, talking about like the realities of this community. Talk a little bit more, if you will, about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And we owe such a debt to Nick Shirley. It's pretty amazing, right? That young man with a phone, basically, right? And video, very crude video that's now been seen tens of millions of times, was able to and willing to expose this fraud on a massive scale being perpetrated primarily by the Somalian migrant community to the United States, which really is the beginning of all of this volatility. Remember, so we really have two issues going on at once, but they are interrelated. We've got a lot of illegals who are being protected by state and local officials there. At the same time, we have a lot of legal immigrants to the United States, mostly legal at least, who are grossly abusing the hospitality and generosity of the American taxpayer and especially Minnesota taxpayers. And that is thankfully starting to get exposed. And by the way, Mayor Frey and Tim Walz, I think they're in legal jeopardy on both of these fronts. I mean, I think it's very likely that they could be facing arrests and indictments on both aspects of it. In other words, what they're doing to ICE, as well as their possible participation in this grand scheme to steal billions and billions of dollars from American taxpayers. And I think what it brings up too, though, also is just this larger issue of immigration. And, we as a country, finally, after roughly 40 years of almost unfettered migration into this country, both legal and illegal, which we have tolerated and even encouraged ever since the amnesty back in the mid 1980s. After 40 years of that, this country is finally coming to a fulcrum moment, and I think to a pivot point where we are deciding: does this country exist for existing American citizens, whether native born or legally naturalized, or does it exist for the world, for the masses of migrants from all over the world? And clearly, Donald Trump was elected with the mandate that we're going to prioritize and protect American citizens. And this Minnesota situation is just really the most obvious and intense flashpoint of that larger debate that's really important, really necessary for our country. And clearly, I come down very squarely on the side of completely prioritizing Americans, to the point where I believe even legal immigration needs to be put on pause, that we need to have a moratorium even on legal immigration. And I would point people directly to what has happened in Minnesota as legal immigration done incredibly poorly, not serving the interests of American citizens.
Yeah, I think Steve's exactly right here. And I think this is broken open, really, this idea that we can talk about if you're not going to assimilate into the country. Everybody kind of had this hands-off thoughts about it because it was politically, now we can talk about it as in more of a politically incorrect way. I know Reagan broke the story yesterday regarding Somalis not being able to be brought back into the country. I'll let her talk about that. But I do think this is a larger point here in Minnesota where the Somali community, they were all brought to the one place, and it's a very insular community. They said that these people built the community, but you look back at the country where they came from, and you kind of question who's the genius that said, "Oh, we're going to bring them into the country," when Somalia is at the state it is that it is currently. So I think we have to look at this, whether it be the 75 other countries that they're looking at stopping immigration from. But I think this is a hard look at what we need to do on immigration and being just the track going forward from the Trump administration.
Yeah, Reagan, you guys broke some serious news over there at the Daily Caller with respect to what the State Department is doing on this front.
Well, first, I'll just say I've been watching a lot of Nick Shirley interviews to watch how he handles this mega fame that he has gotten. And one of the things that he said was, I've thrown the administration a layup. They should absolutely take it and make sure something gets done. And I definitely think when I talk to a lot of the president's voters, right now there's some angst that there's not a ton of action being done, or they feel like the president hasn't delivered. And I think we could argue all day about whether that's true or not. I personally think it's just kind of this winter blues, end of the year type of situation. And so one of the things when a massive story like this happens is you absolutely want to get a slice of the pie. And so I've been pinging my sources for, since that story broke, kind of asking them, hey, what are you going to do on this? What's next? Let me know. Let me be your reporter so I can deliver this to your voters and show them what you're doing. And so it was really great. I was traveling earlier this week, and I got a call from a source who said, we are absolutely going to do something, and we are going to freeze immigration from Somalia, and we are going to really just investigate our whole process. We're going to go back and review it, and until we can find a way to make sure the American people are being prioritized, then we're going to unfreeze immigration from Somalia. I think this is a really great sign for the American people. I think it's a really big story, and there are 75 other countries on that list that they're also reevaluating. But of course, right now, Somalia is the country that everyone's looking at and they're caring about in this community, especially in this Minnesota story. And so some really big news and big action from Marco Rubio's State Department.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.